I've been spending a lot of time lately in great open-world adventures, from the medieval hard-boiled detective Geralt exploring the lands of Velen to the entertaining misadventures of crime in Grand Theft Auto V. Though admittedly, that game is much better in online mode with friends. And even though I've poured almost 100 hours into Witcher 3, and it looks like GTA Online is going to have the same effect, do you know what I keep thinking about?
When was the last time you saw Kate Vine?
It was last Thursday in the college library. I saw her and we chatted for a bit. She seemed her usual self.
What was her usual self?
Oh, just Kate being Kate. You know, a bit wild.
Wild? What way wild?
This is Contradiction, an FMV adventure game based on interrogating suspects about a suspicious death in a small English town. You can find clues and evidence around town, but the bulk of the game is talking to people, finding inconsistencies or lies in their story, and then pouncing on them. The guy playing the detective, Jenks, is playing the eccentric detective to the hilt, complete with constantly intense, bugged-out eyes. He's no Tex Murphy, but the core mystery is interesting enough to keep me coming back, and I'm still wondering what's going on and what this guy could be hiding. My Twitter buddy, Nomen Tuum, hope I'm saying that right, told me about Contradiction, and I was so fascinated I immediately ran over to Steam to buy it. And while there, Steam also informed me of another FMV game, Missing. And my first thought was, oh, somebody finally updated the 2004 game Missing Since January and brought it to Steam. But I was dead wrong. This is entirely different. Missing is another interesting FMV adventure where you star as this guy. Honestly, I don't know anything about him, except perhaps that he's been kidnapped by a Saw-style criminal with a penchant for games and puzzles. I have yet to work my way out of the first room, but it's interesting, and I'll probably finish it after I beat Contradiction. And then there's Her Story, a game where you go hunting through a database of clips of interrogation sessions, trying to solve the mystery of what happened to this woman and her husband. It's not a great game. In fact, the extent of the gameplay is entering words into the database to find new clips, and that's really it. But the emerging narrative that's drip-fed to you almost completely out of order is fascinating and absorbing. And of course, there's my game of the year for 2014, Tesla Effect. It's a shining example of an adventure game that's chock full of humor, fun characters, great moments, and tricky puzzles. It also might be responsible for other people trying to make their own games with FMV. I can't be certain, but it's entirely possible that the devs of Missing, Contradiction, and Her Story saw this and thought, hey, maybe we can do FMV too. And I started to wonder, could FMV be a thing again? Should FMV be a thing again? After all, FMV crashed pretty damn hard around 1996, and it's pretty easy to see why. It was treated more or less as a gimmick, and it's hard not to understand why after seeing games like this...
I'm dead, right? And you're an angel. Is that it?
No.
And this...
Come here! You're killing me!
And, fucking this.
Woo. Hello, Jack. I'm the dealer. I am the croupier.
And I'm not supposed to talk to strangers.
And so I started thinking, what exactly is the problem with FMV? After all, some games used it successfully back in the 90s, like the Tex Murphy Crew, the Wing Commander games, kinda, and Spycraft was pretty freaking awesome. But a lot of games really didn't, and I wanted to take a moment and examine the reasons why. What separates a good FMV game from a bad FMV game? To me, it all comes down to how FMV is used. In the 90s, FMV was practically its own genre, and for good reason. Everybody wanted to make the interactive movie. That seemed to be the next big thing in entertainment at the time. They turned out to be dead wrong, but the point is that a lot of people tried to make these choose-your-own-adventure style games using FMV for presentation. At best, these games might throw in a shooting gallery or two, but otherwise it was basically just picking what clip you wanted to see next. And they might have succeeded if the narrative had been strong enough, but sadly, all of the games where you just make choices and see different clips based on what you pick, they all had really substandard plots and writing. In some cases, really substandard. Substandard. Or just shit. Now, it might be no coincidence that the FMV games that did have above-standard narratives also had actual gameplay mixed in with their FMV cutscenes. Tex Murphy had you exploring 3D spaces, looking for clues and solving puzzles. Wing Commander had you flying in arcade-style space combat sequences. Spycraft has you recreating shot trajectories and doctoring photographs. And yes, all of these games had their fair share of cheese.
Der Kalte Krieg ist vorbei. Die Welt ist vor einer atomaren Apokalypse sicher. Nein, in der nächsten Achtung werde ich Sie über mein neuestes Spielzeug genau informieren. Eine voll funktionsfähige Atombombe. Verpassen Sie es nicht. Morgen in Achtung.
But compared to the majesty of something like Wirehead's storytelling,
Lisa, I told you kids not to play with your father's controller.
ugh, this just makes me sad. The point is that the bad games tended to treat FMV as its own genre of games. The FMV is the gameplay, or at least the central game mechanic, where you just effectively choose the next cutscene you want to watch. Whereas the good games treated FMV as merely a narrative delivery system that glues the actual gameplay together. And it's my earnest hope that future games wishing to use FMV learn from their example, and so far they have. Missing is clearly an adventure game with FMV narrative. It's got plenty of puzzles, picking items up and exploring rooms. Granted, those rooms are just a single 2D screen with some animation, but it still counts. Contradiction comes closer to using FMV as its central game mechanic, but it does so in an interesting way. Yes, you're primarily choosing what FMV clip to watch next by asking witnesses about all sorts of things. But you also have to deduce by yourself which statements the characters made that contradict things they'd said before. So there is skill involved and not just choice. And there's also the fact that you do explore a town and find clues and evidence to ask people about. So there's that.
Always nice to randomly find a key on the floor.
Of the three I mentioned, her story comes the closest to having FMV be its central game mechanic. After all you're really doing is entering search terms into a database to find new clips to watch. But again, there is an element of skill involved. You have to determine what search terms will be the most relevant to finding the next piece of the story. And it's not always obvious what's going to get you there. But even if you consider FMV to be the primary game mechanic, it still stands head and shoulders above games like Wirehead and Fox Hunt, based solely on its superior acting and storytelling. Compare these games to Wirehead, where you literally just pick a direction when the game tells you to. And 2 of the 3 choices always lead directly to death, forcing you to start over. And the game's a big enough asshole to give you limited continues, forcing you back to the beginning and having to sit through this horrible tripe all over again. My favorite way to play is to just simply not make that first choice. Go ahead and take him, bad guys. He's all yours. Do what you will.
That wasn't very nice. I'm not gonna fight you. Just relax. Yeah, let's go for a ride.
Now, that's not to say that every FMV game of the 90s that had actual gameplay around it was good. Angel DEVOID is a great example of this. It did have adventure game trappings, but the game is intolerably slow, the plot and characters are hackneyed, the actors are all high on something. Angel DEVOID suffers from poor design choices throughout. So it's not necessarily enough that your game doesn't use FMV as the primary game mechanic. Your actual game mechanics have to be well done. And as I've said, your narrative and presentation need to be superior as well. Anyway, the future of FMV looks pretty bright right now, but FMV developers, I beg you, learn from the past. Those who fail to learn their history are doomed to repeat it, and as I've said before, the developers of A Fork in the Tail closed their doors for good before the game even came out. Don't make these same mistakes. Let the FMV tell your story. Don't let the FMV be your game.